Hello, friends, and welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Megan Colleen Johnson, and I'm here to guide us in raw conversations about thriving in life and work, so that together we can step into personal agency and stop letting life happen to us. We'll cover topics like health, boundaries, communication, finances, and worthiness. That badass business you've been dreaming of, it's not so far off. The desire to wake up feeling fully alive, it's right around the corner. All right, welcome to the podcast, everyone. I am really excited for today's conversation. I have Dr. Valerie Rein with me here today, and I think it's just going to be a beautiful conversation. So before we dive in, I'm just going to share a little bit about where I'm recording and what I have in front of me, just kind of ground in. So I'm sitting in my office today. We had quite a bit of snow the past few days, so there's a lot of snow outside. It's reflecting in a lot of brightness. Got my coffee, my dog sleeping down on the floor, and I'm just really feeling present today, which is awesome. So yeah, like I said, I have Dr. Valerie Rein on the call with me today, and she has discovered Patriarchy Stress Disorder and created the only science-backed system for helping women achieve their ultimate success, happiness, and fulfillment by healing this collective inherited trauma of oppression. Her best-selling book and groundbreaking programs have helped thousands of women find freedom and reclaim their authentic selves. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's such a pleasure, Megan, and thank you for sharing where you are and what's going on. It's so nice to start in a grounded, sensory way.
Yeah. And I'd love if you feel comfortable, can you also share kind of where you're recording from and like what your surroundings are right now?
Absolutely. I'm in my home office in Tucson, Arizona, and I am looking out at the mountains and the desert. It's nice and warm and sunny. Most days are. And I just love the quietude of these surroundings and the beauty, the natural beauty of nature here. I feel its support.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a little jealous of your sunshine right now.
Yeah, we do have that incredible privilege most days of the year.
So I'd love to start out our conversation. First of all, if you can just kind of share what is patriarchy stress disorder so we have a little context as we dive into our conversation.
Yes, patriarchy stress disorder is the trauma of oppression that gets passed down genetically. And it is really the result of it never being safe under patriarchy for women to be visible, to be powerful, to own our own bodies, to love who we love, to have our own money. And the trauma around not being able to have that, or if even dreaming about that or reaching for that, women were punished. Women were burned at the stake. Women were drowned, locked up in asylums, shamed. And it's a very recent shift in our collective history. In this culture, it's not the case in every culture, that women, we have access to create our own lives, to make our own money, to love who we love. However, we are, for all intents and purposes, the first generation to have that and to have the level of opportunity that we have.
Yeah.
Our nervous system and our whole system doesn't evolve that quickly. So we still carry the trauma of that huge patriarchal prohibition on being fully expressed, being able to express our voice and desire and create our lives designed by our desires. And that's how PSD really manifests for women right now in quote unquote holding ourselves back when we do know that we can do these things. We may even be consciously confident in our abilities. However, our subconscious that carries that trauma of prohibition and punishment over being visible and powerful, it has something to say otherwise. It wants us to
Mm.
feel safe, to be safe. And the way it keeps us safe is by keeping us in what I call this invisible inner prison of PSD that
Mm-hmm.
stops us from having what we want, either by going into freeze or fight or flight. The
Yeah.
freeze would be showing up as us not moving toward our dreams and desires and not even knowing what they are. And fight or flight would be okay, we are moving toward our goals, but we're constantly exhausted. We're
Mm-hmm.
constantly having this inner battle with the inner critic, with the imposter syndrome, and we're having trouble sleeping. We're having trouble relaxing without a glass of wine or a pill. We're constantly on
Mm.
edge and irritable, and sometimes anxiety shows up, sometimes hormonal imbalances, unwanted weight gain or weight loss, and even autoimmune conditions, even
Mm.
adrenal fatigue, chronic migraines. Like there are so many symptoms that show
Mm-hmm.
up when our nervous systems are constantly in overdrive. And my explanation is very simple, really. It's in overdrive because it's trying to keep us safe. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason why we're not feeling safe subconsciously is the inherited trauma of oppression that has spanned countless generations, thousands of years. And here we are, right? It's not our
Yeah.
fault, it's not our shortcoming. And we do need to know what really is at the root of quote unquote us holding ourselves back, so we don't end up blaming ourselves and trying to fix ourselves because we're not
Mm.
broken.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Being able to notice these things and not judge ourselves, just notice that that's what's occurring and then moving forward. I love that. That was a beautiful description and overview of what patriarchy stress disorder is. So I appreciate that. I'd love for you to share it. So you have so much knowledge about this. You discovered it, and I'm so curious. What got you into it? What is your story? How did you start learning about it and kind of creating the structure that you did?
Yeah, thank you. I think I've been on this journey ever since I became aware of myself as a little girl and
Mm,
started asking the question that so
yeah.
many girls and women ask, is the question, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?
Mm,
Why am I not fitting in? Why am I feeling like garbage? Why am I
yeah.
feeling like I'm too much or not enough or the wrong kind? And the question was, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And that question led me on the path of studying psychology, because what better way to understand what's wrong with me than to dig into the diagnostic manuals? And so that was a long journey of going through graduate schools, two of
Mm,
them. So that just goes to show how messed up I was. One was not
oh,
enough. And going to therapy for years. And then I was already practicing as a psychologist, and I had a lot of tools that I used with my clients that were helpful to them.
mm,
And I thought I was living my dream life, really, because I was doing the work that I loved. I had a family and home I loved. And one fine day, I was on the phone with a client when I felt the left side of my face and my body go numb.
mm.
And I ended up in the ER with
Wow.
symptoms of a stroke, which thankfully was not a stroke. My diagnosis was just stress.
Mm,
And that was very awakening
yeah.
because I didn't feel stressed. I didn't feel stressed. I was just living my normal life. And so it brought me to this realization, oh my goodness, how could I not even feel stressed while my body was pretty much sounding the alarm?
Yeah.
And what was creating that underlying stress in my system? Research was coming out at the time about generational transmission of trauma. And what is trauma? Trauma is any experience that makes us feel unsafe. Feeling unsafe creates stress in the system. So that got me really curious about, maybe it's trauma, but what kind of trauma? And realizing then the dots connected that women have been oppressed for thousands of years. Oppression is traumatic. No woman felt safe under patriarchy, safe to be in our bodies, safe to just walk after dark. Really,
Yeah.
we don't need to go to ancient history. Do
Yeah.
you feel safe going through an empty parking lot after dark, right? Or does your system go into a stress mode?
Yeah.
Of course it does, because for obvious reasons. It's always been like women have always felt that. And so these were the dots that connected for me in recognizing, oh my gosh, it's not something that's wrong with me personally. It's actually not anything that's wrong with any woman. This high level of stress is an adaptation to trauma. It's something that's keeping us safe by keeping us on high alert. In the world where now we're doing things that historically have been very unsafe for women, showing up, speaking up, seriously, loving who
Yeah.
we love, being expressed in our sexuality, bringing our gifts to the world. We are doing things that have always been unsafe. So our nervous systems are reacting, and they react in two ways: freeze or fight or flight. That really explained everything. So that's when I termed this condition PSD, for Patriarchy Stress Disorder. And that's when I knew, okay, now we can use the tools to heal it. The tools that heal trauma now apply.
Yeah.
And they involve mind, body, and energy. Through these shifts, we actually access deep layers of trauma that live in our nervous systems, that live in our bodies and energy fields. And then we can liberate ourselves from that legacy of trauma. We can rewire our nervous systems to keep us safe by actually knowing that it's safer for us now to be wealthy. It is safer for us now to have our voices than to not, right? So there's
Yeah.
this major upgrade that needs to happen. And that's what I teach my clients and students now, from the inside out, so that we can create a very different life for ourselves, and we can create a different world designed by our desires.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love how this really connects with the overall message that I feel so passionate about it, just our responsibility to reclaim our life and the opportunity that we have to do that. So, with these tools and with the discoveries that you've made, it's possible to reclaim success, to reclaim happiness, to reclaim fulfillment, and to feel good about those things. I love that so much. I'm curious, what are the symptoms of PSD? How can a woman be able to look and just notice, okay, I think that this is what I'm struggling with?
A very simple answer would be everything that you've ever thought was wrong with you is probably a symptom of PSD. To break it down a little bit is, okay, let's say the inner critic flares up, and like that self-criticism every time we look in the mirror and we go like, oh, like that is not right, this is not right, or look at these wrinkles, or look at that fat, or whatever, like nothing looks good on me. That's all PSD. Like
Yeah.
you are you are amazing, you're beautiful. But just saying that doesn't do anything, right? It's not like you can
Hmm.
me, or you're going to believe yourself when you say it 1,000 times looking in the mirror. And that's why it only shifts when we heal that trauma, that trauma of PSD, that creates that ripple effect of feeling worth less. That's the core wound. The core wound of patriarchy against women is that it's been shown to women again and again in no uncertain terms that we're worth less than men. Our bodies, our ideas, our lives are just worth less. We were never
Mm,
asked to participate in the political decision making. We were never asked to participate in, the economy in an active way. We did a lot of
mm-hmm.
unpaid work behind the scenes, never acknowledged, never, right? So all that, and also patriarchy does a number on how we see ourselves and our beauty. It made our
Mm-hmm.
beauty seem conditional on the color of our skin, on the shape of the
Yeah.
body, on our weight, on our age, on how our hair is or isn't. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Really, these are all
Mm-hmm.
instruments of oppression, right?
Yeah.
The way we judge ourselves and other women now is not our fault. It is not our
Mm-hmm.
shortcoming. These are the tools of oppression, shame being a big one, that patriarchy used against us forever. And it shows up in other areas. It shows up in our relationships in our intimate relationships. Most trouble comes out of us basically not feeling safe in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship. That trauma gets triggered by something like, let's say it's a heterosexual relationship and a guy says something or does something that we perceive as being, critical or dismissive, and it instantaneously triggers our trauma, and it
Mm-hmm.
instantaneously creates either us stonewalling or getting into an argument. And there's so much struggle in that for both parties. And men need to heal as well as women and people across the gender spectrum. There is a lot of healing for us all. So I'm just doing the core areas, right, of expressions of PSD, but it's literally, like
Yeah.
I said, pretty much everything. At work, whether you work for an employer or you work for yourself, the fullest expression of your talents is not there. You are not in the fullest expression of your gifts
Mm,
because it doesn't feel safe subconsciously. So you're holding back subconsciously. You're not
mhm,
commanding the the fees or the salary that would be, I hesitate to even say fair, but because it's such a relative term, but I promise you that you are not making as much as you could be if those inner
mhm,
barriers were not there, affecting your confidence and affecting the way you feel about your worth. And I
mhm,
actually
mhm,
have, maybe it's a better way to explain that would be through a story where maybe our listener will recognize herself in
mm,
that.
yeah,
So I worked with this amazing young woman, and I write about this in my book. I've changed the names of my clients, and sometimes I've combined stories to protect their privacy. And this
for
particular
sure.
story, yeah, is about a woman who came to me specifically because she was a high achieving woman and she had a lot of ambitious things on her list, but she was almost 30 years old, and she felt like she was ready to start a family, and she was not. Like, her dating was just so painful. Again
Mm,
and again, a heartbreak. Again and again, just the candidates were just going from bad to worse. And what was actually going on? Her conclusion with each failed relationship was, oh my gosh, well, if I couldn't make it work with this guy who already doesn't have ambition, who's not making much money, or who doesn't have like the same values as me, who doesn't take good care of his body, if I couldn't make it work with him, I need to lower my bar even more. And maybe next time date somebody who lives with his parents, and doesn't have any friends.
oh gosh.
So it was, it was like that, and slightly exaggerating to make a point, but maybe you can recognize
Yeah.
how that trajectory goes, lowering the bar
Mm-hmm.
until it's like underground. And at work, she was having the same dynamic. She was a very talented professional. And at work, she was underpaid, overworked, emotionally abused by her
Mm-hmm.
bosses. And of course, her conclusion was something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
Something's wrong with me. And people are just seeing the truth. Oh, so painful. And when we started working together and digging down to that wound of worthlessness, which, as we now
Mm-hmm.
know, comes from PSD, she was able to connect with a guy who was a very different type of person and treated her very differently. He saw
Mm-hmm.
her greatness, her beauty. His values were in alignment with hers. They wanted the same things. And she was in such disbelief because he treated
Mm-hmm.
her so well, like the queen and goddess that she is. And he
Mm-hmm.
was so solid in how he took care of himself and his career. He was so solid. And she was freaking out. And that's an interesting thing because self-sabotage, right?
Yeah.
It was such a contrast to her wound of worthlessness that her system just couldn't accept that it could be true. And
Mm.
thankfully, we worked together. So we worked through that. But she wanted to run away. Every step of the way, she would be like, no, we can never move in together because then he'll find out who I really am, see all my flaws, and he'll run away. Or he can never meet my family because they're crazy. His family is so good. And so et cetera, et cetera. So thankfully we worked through all that, layers and layers, as you can see, and they were able to build a very solid relationship and eventually get married. And her work also that was the same shift. She shifted from that position where she was overworked and underappreciated to a
Mm-hmm.
great job that elevated both her income and her freedom. She was able to have a flex schedule and
Mm-hmm.
work from anywhere in the world. She started traveling, and
Mm-hmm.
her environment and her bosses just adored her and welcomed her gifts and her creative input. I'm sharing that because I hope that it's helpful to our listeners in seeing everything you think is wrong with you. It is not you. It is that
Mm-hmm.
wound of PSD and other kinds of trauma too that can be healed. And that's when your life begins to change. That's when you can live a life designed by your desires and not just kind of settling for the crumbs that come
Mm-hmm.
floating your way from somewhere, right, based
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
trauma, because we do create how we feel about ourselves inside. And no
Yeah.
woman is born, unless there is an outlier somewhere who is so blessed, no woman is born feeling like the queen and goddess that she is. It takes healing to
Mm-hmm.
unfurl that.
Mm-hmm. I love everything you just shared about. I feel like I've heard the beginning of her story. I feel like I've heard that so many times. And even
Mm,
my own journey, I struggled with a work situation I got myself into because I didn't feel, worthy, and I would blame myself for everything that was occurring. And I feel like that worth piece is such a huge part of this, where we tell ourselves that we're not worthy of success. We tell ourselves that we're not worthy just as we are. What can you provide as support really to help break through
mhm.
some of that? Because that's definitely something that I hear from my people, is just like, well, what if I'm not worthy? Like, how can I be worthy just as I am? And like, what does that mean for me? And then also just feeling like sometimes our dreams are too big, which is, connected to that worth piece.
Oh,
But what do you have in regards to that?
that is a great question, Megan. And it's so connected. Feeling the dreams are too big. Again, it comes from PSD. And the reason is very simple. If you think about it, there is nothing more dangerous to patriarchy than a woman who is in touch with her desires.
Yeah.
There's nothing more dangerous because this woman can change the world. This woman is unstoppable. That's why
Mm,
our desires are very well protected within us by what I call prison guards, because I describe PSD as the invisible in the prison. And those prison guards are trauma defenses. They are they show up as those symptoms that I just described in the story. They show up as feeling less than, they show up as that shame and feeling, oh,
mm-hmm,
it is my fault, right? Because that's what
mm-hmm,
patriarchy wants us to think and feel. And then we get trapped. So that's a great way to get started on the healing journey, is to start excavating that desire. And I actually have a practice that I describe in the book, and it makes a lot more sense when you read the book. But even before you do, you can download this practice on my website. It's free,
mm,
and it's a part of the materials that come with the book. It's at drvalerie.com/book dash resources. And it's the practice on desire, getting connected with that desire. And it's a little more involved or intricate than it sounds. It's not what we think we want, because there's a lot of programming. Oh, yeah, I should want to make a
mm,
lot of money. I should want to get married. I should want to have children, or
yeah,
whatever that is for you. I should want a nice car, or I should want to change the world. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.
mm-hmm,
What this practice is designed to help you with is go into your body, go into your subconscious. That expresses through the body, interestingly enough, and start getting whispers. 'Cause it's not going to be loud at first. Start getting little breadcrumbs of what it actually is that you desire. And if you don't get it right away, it just goes to show what you'll meet face to face is those prison guards, is those defenses that are protecting your access to your desire. These are the same defenses that you're running into in other areas of your life when you're moving
mm-hmm.
towards your goals. And that's okay. That's expected. All of us have that. And I have that, and I work on that every day, because again, it's not our fault. These are protections created by that trauma. But that's where I recommend that you get started, because that is the way to get in touch with that North Star of your desire.
Mm,
That will then guide all of your actions. And yes, prison guards will show up every step of the way. And there are other techniques and practices that I share in the book. And we also have a free training coming up that's more in depth. And we have a guided program coming up if you want to, if it's urgent and important enough for you to stop settling for
yeah.
the breadcrumbs and start claiming the whole feast that your life has to offer, then you can find out more at drvalerie.com. There's a little button there that says something like join the wait list. That's for the program. That's your way to raise your hand and say, hey, Dr. Valerie, send me the details, and I want to see what that's all about.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for all of those resources and sharing kind of where people can go on that. I wanted to quick circle back to, you had talked a lot about desire, and essentially we need to tap back into our body and listen to it and hear it, and start noticing what are feelings and what are facts, because that things tend to get jumbled up, but just to feel
Mm-hmm.
into our bodies and our desires. And I'm curious, I don't know what your religious background is, but something that I've run into with some of my audience members is they're very religious. A lot of them are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And what they run into is this struggle of feeling comfortable with their desires and feeling okay, kind of tapping into their body, when some of their belief system has this separation of kind of mind and body.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts around that and how they can feel connected to their religion in regards to God and
Mm.
honoring God, while also feeling comfortable with their desires and comfortable with their dreams, and feels like that's still a safe place.
Yeah. Wow, this is really big. And I'm gonna, yeah.
It's a big question, I know, and we did not talk about diving into this. So if we need to, shift into some other things, that's okay too, because there was no preface for this.
We're totally gonna go there, Megan, because I want everybody who's listening to get exactly what they need to get, and if it resonates, to be able to take that next step. So if religion is doing its part in that separation from the body and separation from desire, I believe that there is a way to actually do it in harmony, because ultimately religion or faith, so religion and
Hmm.
faith, these are different things.
Yeah.
Your relationship with God, this is my take, right?
Hmm.
The relationship with God, it's through the heart, isn't it? Isn't it through the
Hmm.
heart, that the heart
Hmm.
is the center of your relationship with God? That's why you practice your religion. That's my guess. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But my guess is that your heart is longing for that deep relationship, that deep connection with God. And your heart knows. Your heart is that center of knowing, is that seat of your authenticity, is the seat of your inner wisdom. And your heart also holds your dreams and your desires. And to me, this is such a litmus test. Getting into the heart, not the mind. You were talking about feelings and facts and how
Hmm.
things get jumbled up. Everything that our mind carries, there are a lot of lies there that are just not true to our experience. Lies that we made up, that were made up for us.
Hmm.
To me, getting in touch with the truth involves jumping or journeying from the head to the heart. In your heart, you know. In your heart, you know what's true, what's not true. And even that meditation on desire, I sometimes call it meditation on your heart's desire, because
Hmm.
it does take you into your heart, it does take you into your body. And yeah, that is how I feel about what could be helpful in in getting in touch with your truth while staying in integrity with your relationship with the divine, and even actually getting into more integrity, because if we just stay on the
Hmm.
level of the mind, it's not deep enough. It's what kind of a
Hmm.
relationship is like from the mind alone? Seriously, like it's
Yeah.
we're not heads with bodies attached that we just like drag around for transportation. We are whole human beings. It's for a reason. And if you subscribe to that idea that God created us, there was probably a reason why we have the bodies and minds that
Yeah.
that go together. These are my thoughts and feelings about this.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I know something that's been helpful for me as I kind of connect these pieces as well is understanding that the more we step into our power and into our truth, we're also really learning how to stand in emotional maturity, being able to communicate really well and not, it is breaking down the lies that are the social constructs. And in that, I feel like the divine has to be present. It really is a reflection, of this relationship with the divine, and reconnecting to ourselves, which is, an embodiment of the creation. And so the more we step into our power, the more we're actually utilizing what we've been given. And that's been helpful for me as well. But I love the way that you worded that. We're a whole being, right?
It's a beautiful way to frame that too, Megan. I love that.
This is so great. So, I would love to shift slightly and talk a little bit about men. So, in light of your discovery with
Mm-hmm.
PSD, kind of what is your message for men in this,
Mm-hmm.
and how are they affected, and how can
Yeah.
we kind of understand where they're at?
Yeah. First, men doesn't equal patriarchy, and patriarchy doesn't equal men. So this is the main
Mm,
thing I want associated with that idea of PSD, that this is not nothing against men. It's not something that bashes men or blames men at
mm,
all. Men
yeah.
are affected as well, and differently, but also traumatized by patriarchy. If women have the wound of being worth less than men, men have the wound of being worth less than the patriarchal idea of what a man should
Mm,
be.
yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, that's good.
As we know, the cost of membership in the patriarchal club is very high. Well,
Mm-hmm.
for men, it comes at the cost of their emotions, of their connection with their inner feminine, but also being able to be fully expressed, authentic beings,
Mm-hmm.
nurturing, caring, soft, as well as hard, and receiving and receptive, as well as giving and active,
Mm-hmm.
and deeply able to connect with themselves and their partners on a vulnerable and intimate level, as well as go to battle. All of that is a complexity of a human that
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy denies men. It denies men all these wonderful attributes that are associated with the feminine, like being nurturing, being good listeners, or being able to be vulnerable. That is seen as a
Mm-hmm.
weakness. Boys don't cry. And that traumatizes men so deeply. And men actually have more completed suicides than women.
Mm.
Women have more attempts. So both have a lot of pain, a
Yeah.
lot of pain. And men also are conditioned to not talk about their pain. That further complicates things and makes the pain express as addictions, as wrecked relationships. I don't have to tell you, like, we all know men and how good men suffer. Good men
Mm.
suffer because
Yeah.
they cannot be fully who they are. And so my hope is, with the message of PSD, is that men as well start recognizing that they they have trauma. All humans have trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and trauma is something that makes you feel unsafe, right, and creates trauma adaptations. I was delighted to learn that not only women give this book to their male partners and they receive with a lot of gratitude, but also men who are picking this book up on their own. And I have some reviews on Amazon about that were just very surprising for me, and delighted. I was delighted
Mm-hmm.
to hear that men are reading and rereading the book and are actually learning something for themselves, not only just about the women in their lives. And I do have one case study about a man in the book, who I worked with as a client, but it's helpful for them as well. And that is so gratifying for me to hear, because
Yeah.
ultimately we all need to heal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about women versus men. It's not about, oh, you did this to me. No,
Mm-hmm.
it is about
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that this system really wounded us all very deeply, and it is us reclaiming our full humanity that the healing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's good. I feel like one of my favorite pieces out of what you just said was, um, the patriarchy isn't men, and I think
Mm-hmm.
as a culture, feminism has grown a lot, and what I've noticed in that is sometimes that feminism almost makes men the enemy in a way. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not the men, it's they've also been conditioned just like we have, and it's the patriarchy, it's this structure that's actually what we need to break down, and
Mm-hmm.
collectively as humans we can reclaim our humanity, what you just said. That's
Yeah.
I love that. So I would love to chat with our last 15 minutes or so. I know you mentioned the meditation and some other resources, but what are like 3 empowering tips that the listeners can implement today to start reclaiming their humanity?
I'm going to actually walk through the first 3 steps of the system that I teach in my programs and my clients,
Mm,
because they're effective. The first step we are actually in the middle of right now, and it's waking up in prison. It's waking up and realizing
mm,
there's nothing wrong with me. What is holding me back? What is preventing me from fully unfurling my gifts in the world and having the life I dream of is trauma that I inherited, that is collective, and that I've experienced in my life too. There are layers. And seeing these layers, what we're doing right here, right now, hope our listeners are also resonating. Oh my gosh. So this is where it comes from. To me, this is the first step to liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing there is nothing wrong with you. There's trauma
Yes.
and it can be healed. So my big hope is that our listener right now is already feeling better and lighter and more hopeful
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that things can shift, because that's what it takes to take the next step. And the next step would be, in my system, meeting your prison guards. And these prison guards developed at the time of the trauma. Let's say historically, it's been unsafe for women to speak up and be in touch with their voice and speak their truth.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that what happened
Yeah.
to women who spoke up, nothing
Yeah.
good. They were not
Yeah.
celebrated.
No.
And our nervous system remembers that, because to survive, that information was passed down generation to generation. So the nervous system is very wise, and the prison guards are keeping us safe. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to fight them. We're not going to try to destroy them or outrun
Mm-hmm.
them, as sometimes is taught in personal development. Just like shift your mindset and do the thing anyway. Because what happens
Mm-hmm.
then, something else catches up with you, because the nervous system signals it's not safe, it's not safe, and it's not safe. So the prison guards show up in the mind, in the body, and in our actions. And in this step, we learn to really identify. That's what I walk people through in the programs. The Thriving Solution is the name of the program that we're launching in just a few days. Depending on when the podcast airs, we may already be at it, but we do have rolling enrollment, so you're not being left behind. It's the process of meeting your prison guards, getting to know them so well, so that every time something shows up in you, you're not automatically blaming yourself and shaming yourself and thinking,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh my gosh, I'm failing again. I'm doing this." No, it's your nervous system keeping you safe. And in the third step, we evolve these prison guards into our bodyguards, which is very cool. And for that, we use mind, body, energy tools. Now, also teaching the program. And some of these tools, the starter package, so to speak, are in the book and are on my website, drvalerie.com. You can just look in the menu and see where those tools are, because there are a few. These tools create the feeling of safety in our subconscious and our nervous system, so that we're able to get in touch with our desires, with our
Mm-hmm.
voice, and feel confident. Confidence comes from feeling safe, by the way,
Yeah.
because we rewire that old trauma based wiring. And now we can shine, and now we can create the life designed by our desires. So these are the three steps that lead us out of the prison.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for walking through those. And again, it sounds like you have so many amazing resources. I honestly have not dove into all of them and like looked through everything you have, but now I'm curious and I'm going to have to look them up for myself.
I am so
So,
excited and can't wait to hear. And there is one more, if I may
yeah.
mention that for our listeners. If you are curious about the book, you can actually check out the first chapter for free. It's on my website, drvalerie.com, on that page. You can download it right now, start diving in. And then if you want to continue, the link to the Amazon page is right there too. And you can read the reviews, you can read about the transformations. And I hope that your story of transformation is already in the making, starting from this conversation and the
Mhm.
next breadcrumbs, right? That leads you on this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And I know I'm probably just going to purchase the book, but I love that the free chapter is up as well. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
As we wrap up, I'm curious, and these are just kind of some fun or this is a personal question,
Uh-huh.
but what is one way that you slow down amidst our busy world?
Hmm. Breath is both a telltale sign that I'm speeding up
Mm,
and the way to slow down. So when I notice that I'm not breathing deep enough, and
yeah.
we are culture of shallow breathers, and that is also connected with trauma, right? It's a trauma response,
Mm,
it's a stress response. So first noticing that the breath is a little shallow and then just slowing the breath down, equalizing the inhale and the exhale. I actually on my website also there is a tool called 3-part breath that you can also
mm,
check out. That's one of the tools that I use pretty much every day, several times a day. And I
yeah.
find it very effective to reset my nervous system wherever I am.
I love that. I love that. And I also love how you've just kind of throughout our conversation pointed out the different trauma responses. I feel like as a culture, we misidentify trauma in a lot of ways. So I feel like this
Yes.
conversation really helps to redefine that, which is something I feel pretty passionate about because I feel like trauma is kind of everywhere. So I appreciate that you've done that throughout our conversation. I love that.
Thank you.
So then another question is, who are a couple of your current role models or mindset expanders?
Gosh, there's so much information, right, that is available every day. And I'm a very curious person. And so there can be just a social media post that inspires me and like, oh my gosh, this
Mm,
person creates these amazing things. So I struggle to name a single person, but I'm going to share my litmus test for an expander versus a contractor. And I
oh, yeah.
yeah, so there may be some things, especially in this current climate where personal development is so hip and
Mhm.
everybody and their grandmother doing that,
Yeah.
which is cool. But there is a lot of PSD under the guise of personal development out there. And the litmus
Mm,
test
mm,
is if something makes you feel like you don't know or makes you feel ashamed or less
yeah.
than, or like you're not doing something you're supposed to be doing, that's
Mhm,
a contractor. That's not an expander. An expander always affirms you. It lets you know that you're already whole and
mhm,
there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to fix yourself. And that is coincidentally, I just had another interview where we dove into how we vote with our dollars. That is
mm,
also the litmus test of my purchasing decisions. If something is being sold to me on the premise that I don't already have it, like I don't already know it, and they're the only source that I will ever know that, and I'm not good enough without it. Buy this diet program or die fat or whatever. Or your
yeah.
life is over or you're ugly, but if you buy this serum, you'll have a
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
these contractors, right? So pay attention to your body, how you feel when you, let's say, scrolling through social media, when you feel expansive, yeah, like read further. If
Mhm,
you feel contracting, that's shame. And
mhm,
that's a patriarchal tool of control and oppression. And that's
mhm.
triggering your trauma. And just, notice that it's happening. And that's a sign that more healing needs to happen. And if you can, move on.
Yeah, yep. That's like what I call, or like my kind of brand term for that is like you're becoming your own reclamation queen. So it's kind of stepping into
Ooh,
that role of being the expert
yes.
on your own life. So when you are the
Yes.
reclamation queen of your life, you're in charge of your life, right? Nobody else is. And if someone's
Yeah.
trying to tell you that they know better than you, that they have the key or it's exactly what you were just saying. It's like this manipulative sales tactic or,
Yeah.
a tactic to keep you playing small. But when you step into that role of queen of your life, you can make the decision of, yes, this is expansive or no, this is not for me.
Love
And you
that.
can trust that.
Reclamation queen, 100%.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that you shared that. That's so good. Awesome. And then you've shared this a few other times throughout the podcast, but I'd love for you to kind of share it as we wrap up too, is like, where can we find and support you online and just get to know more about your
Oh,
message?
yeah, absolutely. And I want to say that PSD also may stop you from picking up the next breadcrumbs on the way to liberation because
Mm-hmm.
the prison guards don't want you liberated, right?
Yeah.
And they may stop you from connecting. They may say, "Oh, she's important. She wrote a book. Oh, she's too busy. She doesn't want to hear from me." I actually do want to hear from you. You can
Yeah.
connect. You can DM me on Instagram, Dr. Valerie Rein, on Facebook as well, Dr. Valerie Rein, and shoot me an email, valerie@drvalerie.com.
Mm,
I want you to know that you are super important. You are super important. You are that opportunity that the world doesn't have right now if you stay imprisoned. If
mm,
your desires and your purpose and your mission remain unrealized, the world won't have that opportunity. And I value that opportunity so, so much. I value you so, so much. And I want to stay connected on this journey because it's bigger than any one of us. It is about changing
mm,
the world by embodying that change for ourselves, for our daughters and sons, for everyone around us, for our relationships, for our clients, for even for our parents. It affects
mhm,
everyone. So please stay connected on this journey. Share with us your takeaways. Send a message. If you pick up the book, share about the book. I actually reshare everything that people share in their Instagram stories, etc. And it's always so heartwarming. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask. I'm here
mm.
for you. This is the work that we owe ourselves, generations before and after us, and the world. So we're all in this together.
Thank you so much for all of that and just for being here today. And I just want to say I really appreciate your genuine spirit. Like I feel like I feel very calm in this conversation. You just have a very calming and genuine presence. So I just really appreciate that. And thank
Thank
you so
you.
much for all of your knowledge today and sharing your heart and passion behind this. So
Such
I'm
a
so excited
pleasure.
to share this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for a great interview. And thank you, everyone who tuned in to listen.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Dr. Valerie Rein and really loved learning all about patriarchy stress disorder. So much so that I decided to actually become an affiliate of hers. So if you decide that one of her programs is a good fit for you, I would love for you to sign up using the link in the description of this episode or within the show notes of this episode at thereclamationpodcast.com. That just gives me a little kickback as well so I can continue producing great content like this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Reclamation Podcast. I hope it served you on your own reclamation journey and know that I'm rooting for you all the way. If you want to learn more about the show guests, head to the website, thereclamationpodcast.com. And if you found value in the show, 5 stars is always appreciated. Good things are coming for you. Bye for now.